Let's discuss this now with Grant Masterson of the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. So, a very detailed, well-researched report pulled together by the former Deputy Chief Justice. Do you think he's made the right recommendation?
Good evening, Sally. It's such a tough call. You know, we at eNCA had put a submission forward to say that we really thought the elections could go ahead, that with the experiences we've seen elsewhere around the world, elections have gone ahead and they've been democratic and there haven't been health issues. But each election is a different event. And so I think in the end here, Justice Moseneke gave very clear reasons for why he came down on the side of caution, why he listened to the medical experts, and why he felt that there would be some sacrifices in terms of the democratic nature of the elections themselves. I thought he was very clear in his oral submission today, and also he's put together a very, very hefty report which has taken into account all of the views that were expressed.
Of course, the IEC now has to decide if they're going to act on those recommendations. Would it be surprising if they don't?
I would be very surprised if they don't react this way to Moseneke's report. I mean, why have the report if you're going to dismiss it? So I would be very surprised to see the IEC reject the findings in their entirety. There may be some recommendations that they may not take up. None of these recommendations that Moseneke gives them are binding in any way. They're advisory in nature. So the IEC is ultimately where the buck stops for now. And then later on, there may be decisions that need to be taken in the courts and possibly even on the president's desk. So I'd be very surprised if this report doesn't end up seeing the election date pushed back.
It was very interesting what Dikgang Moseneke said about the parlous state of local governments, and he said they were absolutely due for a reset, that if you look at the Auditor General's report, it's actually getting worse. What does this potential delay mean for local government? Does it mean a little bit more time to get their act together so when they start campaigning they can say, look what we've done? Or is it potentially problematic in your view?
It's problematic. As I said, eNCA's submission was that we feel the importance of holding these elections on time is very significant. Any kind of deferment or delay to an election is never a small thing. Even with the way that Justice Moseneke has gone about detailing the reasons why, he himself has acknowledged that we are on a slippery slope the moment that we start to just willy-nilly defer elections for any reason. Now, I think we can appreciate that the coronavirus pandemic is not just willy-nilly deferring an election. But once you started to defer elections, then you do really enter into the space where it can become problematic. And as for the local government, if they're not going to sort their act out in 5 years and 3 months, what's an extra 4 months going to do? Honestly, I don't have much hope for the underperforming local government councils. I can't imagine that voters do either. I think voters are eager to be able to express their will at the ballot box, and we really look forward to that happening sooner than later.
He also said it might actually be a good thing to hold the elections a little bit later, because he was talking about the new financial year would kick in, I think he said July 2022, and that would give them a bit of a clean slate. Do you understand what he was getting at? Did he have a good point?
You know, the team that he had was a superb team of researchers, and he himself has clearly applied his mind to bring in that kind of level of detail and nuance about the way our governance systems work. I think it was a really good point. In terms of the budget process and the way the budgets are handled at local government, he wasn't handing over a fresh budget to the old councils, and I think that that's a significant element of the way in which local councils govern. So he was mindful of the fact that whilst there is a deferment, there is not going to be a meaningful deferment in terms of shaping the spending priorities into the first year of the next local government regime. And I think that means that whilst the delay is not ideal, and certainly from our perspective we didn't want to see it, at the same time the delay does not end up meaningfully impacting year one of the new administrations.
So what's going to happen next? Heidi Jarkos was telling us that the IEC really has just a couple of days to make a very fast decision, because if they're going to go ahead, they've got to hit the ground running. If they decide that they do want to push the elections into next year, my understanding is that the political parties have already had their say. So what happens next? Does it go to the Constitutional Court?
So at this stage, what was expressed by the IEC commissioners this afternoon was that they don't believe that a constitutional amendment is necessary. Now, I don't know that that is going to be the fact, but it was a view that was expressed by several very knowledgeable persons during the hearings, the oral hearings. So the likely first step would be to the Electoral Court to see whether the Electoral Court is prepared to grant some kind of extension to the current term under unusual circumstances. It does appear as though there is scope within the laws and within the framework to do this, but it will ultimately be up to the courts to decide. And Justice Moseneke, being a former Constitutional Court justice himself, was very careful not to step into the realm of pronouncing on that fact. He simply said he would leave it to the necessary processes to get this deferment made appropriately legal. As for the political parties, as you say, there are some parties that are happy right now, some who are not. That's always the nature of politics. I'm sure there are many people, voters as well, who are justifiably saddened that the elections will not take place. But we live in extraordinary times right now, and I think at the end of the day, Justice Moseneke had a huge task on his hands to balance the considerations of the health of citizens and the health of voters and the staff of the IEC against our democratic and constitutional rights.
Well, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Grant Masterson, Head of Programs at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Still ahead this